Hi, I'm Femi Oke, and you're in the stream. Today, many US Republicans are concerned that the businessman Donald Trump might actually end up being their presidential nominee. Still in the race, we have Ted Cruz, Marco Rubio, and also John Kasich. But if you compare them to how well Donald Trump has done, well, they're somewhat behind. Trump has won over half of the states in the US. So the question is, why are these candidates still in the race? It's a question that our digital producer, Malika Bilal, I believe, has an answer right at her fingertips. Malika?
Several answers, of course. People online are pontificating about this. One of the reasons is it's got the electorate excited. Another reason that we're seeing online is because of the fact that even though Trump is the front runner right now, he's still a pretty divisive figure, and that's even among Republican voters. Now, only 49% of those voters, according to one poll, would be satisfied with Donald Trump as their party's nominee in this year's general election. That's far lower than any other candidates in recent memory, and you can see that represented here. Now, some of the reasons for that can be seen online with a specific hashtag. It's hashtag #NeverTrump, which both Democrats and Republicans have been using. Now, Josh is just one of those. He tweets, "If you believe conservative ideas are worth saving, then never Trump." But Brandon says that hashtag makes me want to vote for Trump even more. So we want to let you know what you think. We with hashtag AJStream. Femi?
Now, it's not just the other candidates and their supporters who are opposed to Donald Trump becoming the Republican nominee, but many within the party establishment itself. Last week, the 2012 candidate Mitt Romney spoke out very strongly against Trump, as have many Republican lawmakers, strategists and advisors who feel he doesn't represent their values and would lose the general election in November. But for all of that talk, the anti-Trump movement has yet to come up with a clear strategy or decide which candidate to unite around. So can Republicans opposed to Donald Trump stop him? Or are they too divided? To help us talk about this, we're joined in the studio by Sabrina Siddiqui. She's a political reporter with The Guardian US. Sitting next to her, Stephen Rodriguez is a Republican national security advisor and a part of the anti-Trump movement. On Skype from Tennessee, Scotty Nell Hughes, a Trump supporter and chief political correspondent for the conservative USA radio network. And in Florida, Demetrius Snell is a conservative Republican who supports Republican candidate John Kasich. Good to have you here, everybody. Scotty, are you really happy that this conversation is even happening? Your candidate is doing apparently really well.
Well, you have to realize if this would have been any other candidate, we probably would not be talking about this. That we would already have the Republican nominee. You know, last summer, 2 years ago even, the RNC actually front-loaded, changed all of the calendars and front-loaded the schedule of the primary states because they wanted to get as quickly to the Democrats versus them as possible. They even moved up the Republican convention to July when it used to be further in August or September. They were so sure they were going to have their candidate as the person that was going to be the nominee. Now what you're seeing is this complete split, this complete divide. The good news for me as a conservative is what started out as being 3 or 4 candidates who I really support. The top 2 candidates are representative of the conservative movement of the GOP. That silent majority has awoken what we always said was there for the last 8 years.
Sabrina, I mean, it's not unusual for there to be some vying in terms of who should be the presidential nominee. I mean, that's typical, right?
That's typical, but you're seeing this very uncharacteristic primary where you have so much frustration in the grassroots and a lot of anger with the party establishment. So previously, they have had these outsiders challenge the presumptive nominee. You remember 2012, and you did have Rick Santorum, who went pretty far, and Michelle Bachmann, Newt Gingrich. A lot of these candidates did well at certain points in time, but ultimately Mitt Romney was able to succeed. And now you're seeing essentially the reverse of that, where Jeb Bush tried and failed. Marco Rubio is trying, he's losing, he's holding on for his life in Florida. John Kasich has to win his home state of Ohio, and there's just this split with no clear consensus alternative to Donald Trump.
Stephen, Sabrina talked about frustration. That is the number one thing that we heard from people online who identified themselves as Republican voters. So here's just a couple of them. This is Martin. He says, "The powers that be are dismissive of the base. They think they know better than us. They're elitist in nature, and so it's time for a shakeup." Another person, this is David, he says, "Some Republican voters are alienated from the GOP, and that's the nickname of the Republican Party in the U.S., and politics in general. Trump is a great spoiler candidate from that point of view." Can you identify at all with that feeling of frustration?
Yes, absolutely. In fact, I happen to be a conservative Republican myself, and yet amazingly, as a national security professional as well, Donald Trump has succeeded remarkably in bringing all of us together. These are individuals who disagree on the Iraq War and foundational issues over the last decade or so, and yet he has done a terrific job in bringing us all of us together, which is why we all signed that open letter that came out last week.
We just show the open letter here. Open letter on Donald Trump from GOP, the Grand Old Party, also known as the Republican Party, national security leaders. And then you go through point by point, Stephen, why you think he's a terrible candidate, would be a terrible candidate for running for the Republicans. What's the most important point for you that would make him so not the right person?
I think at its base level, he is fundamentally dishonest about his policy positions in years past, ones he's clearly made. And I understand that views evolve over time, but this is simply misrepresentation. He's also come out...
Be specific. Give specifics. That's one of those general talking points that I have to deal with on a daily basis. Be specific. Where has he flip-flopped on?
His support for the 2003 Iraq War and his support for the 2011 Libyan invasion.
Okay, let's go to the 2003 Iraq War. He did state few months before going in that he was against it. Then once it started, those first few weeks, it would have been unpatriotic for him to come out and say, I'm against it. Your soldiers were there. We were just on the ground. However, 3 months later, he started saying, guys, this is not a good idea because we don't have a strategy of it. 2 years later, as we were still there, he was even stronger about it. But anything he would have said at that point when we first hit and we first sent our soldiers in would have seemed unpatriotic, and he would have been completely annihilated by the press for not supporting our soldiers.
That is true.
First off, Donald Trump's ability to evaluate military strategy is curious given his pedigree as a real estate flip-flopper and self-promoter. So the idea that there was some...
Flip-flopper, you mean a real estate investor?
The idea that there was some hidden strategy and that he was being patriotic and intelligent in his policy pronouncements would be, I think, disingenuous and a dramatic departure from every single other public announcement. And look, this is a candidate for president, the current leading candidate for president, who has a 30-year track record of making amazing statements in the media that are deeply irresponsible, and yet, I'll give him credit, remarkably consistent. You know, his foreign policy belongs in the 19th century, not the 21st century, and harkens back.
You mean he's not a neocon like you, that he wants to just go in and blow things up?
So
that's kind of what it sounds like you want.
Let me just phrase it out. Demetrius, go ahead.
Well, I mean, he's an anti-Trump supporter, and it's because of Trump's flip-flopping. But, I mean, we look at Marco Rubio, who flip-flopped as soon as he got into Washington, D.C., as far as our immigration bill. He fought in Florida, because I'm a Florida resident. He fought in Florida about being anti-immigration and no immigration this, no immigration that. Then he gets in Washington.
As we're following this as an international TV network and international viewers around the world, is there panic in the Republican Party right now about how well Donald Trump is doing?
There is some panic, and I believe the panic comes from those who are in the establishment part of the party. They don't like Trump. They don't want to see Trump win. I'm indifferent about the whole situation because I think he has a chance of winning.
What makes you so indifferent?
The thing that makes me indifferent is because I look at the other two candidates that we have that are like right behind him, such as Ted Cruz and Marco Rubio, both who are freshman senators in the Senate. They both have flip-flopped on issues. They both have the worst track records ever in the Senate. It's like, if you want us to vote for you to be president, you have to do your job first as senator. And it's horrible. It's atrocious that they can't even show up to Congress to work. I have to show up to work. You have to show up to work. Otherwise, we don't get paid. They don't show up to work. Every time it's time to vote, there's something that they have come up that they can't make it to the Senate. And that's an issue for me. If I feel like if you can't show up as a senator, then what makes me think you're going to show up as a president? We had that issue in 2000.
I actually think that the Congress side of this is important and really the part of the untold story of Donald Trump and how we got to this point. Republicans who control both the House and the Senate and Congress, so both chambers of our legislative body, made a lot of promises over the course of time to their base that they did not keep. You know, they ran on a platform where as long as we gain seats here, as long as we retake majorities in Washington, we can repeal the president's health care law, we can prevent immigration reform, you know, at least in this, what they opposed, which is so-called, what they view as amnesty, which is providing citizenship to undocumented immigrants. We can prevent that from happening. We'll block the president's executive orders. They had this long list of a conservative wish list that they pledged to enact, but under President Obama, obviously they can't do that because he's a Democratic president. And so that frustration is what we're seeing manifest. I think, you know, you see even Demetrius, who's a John Kasich supporter, so he's not someone who's necessarily supporting outsiders like Donald Trump, but you can see the visible frustration with people like Ted Cruz and Marco Rubio, who are sitting senators who embody, I think, what everyone is revolting against right now, which is that the political system is broken, and that we're sick and tired of politicians who are making promises they can't keep, and we'd rather have someone like Donald Trump, who's a straight talker, even if he can't necessarily achieve what he's promising to do, we'd rather have someone who's going to tell it like it is.
So Scotty, you know, one of the words Demetrius used was establishment. Sabrina here was talking about congressional leaders. Really, it's all the same thing, and that's what people online have picked up on. So this is Akash. He says that establishment, the Republican elite, they fear Trump corrodes conservative legacy, and that could lead to what this next person says is a split party. You know, earlier Femi was talking about some of the potential panic in the party. Do you think that that exists, and do you think it could lead to a split party?
Well, absolutely. I think there is a lot of panic going on in the party right now. But maybe this is something, and as the great guest before just alluded to, needed to happen because the current status of our Congress, as controlled by Republicans, has done nothing different. In fact, they've almost been easier to get along with this administration than when the Democrats and Harry Reid was in control. So at this point, that's why we have this frustration for it. They're going to need somebody to go in there almost like Miley Cyrus on a wrecking ball and just tear down the entire bureaucracy that has been built by this administration.
I've just got an image now of Donald Trump on a wrecking ball wearing not a leotard. Thank you for that, Scotty. Let me add, talking about a wrecking ball, let me talk about some of the things that have been happening to see if the Republican Party could actually derail Donald Trump. So this was Mitt Romney on March the 3rd, and we've basically cut a lot of clips together, but this was a full frontal attack. Have a listen to Mitt Romney.
Donald Trump is a phony, a fraud, a business genius. He is not. The absurd third-grade theatrics. Mr. Trump is a con man, a fake. Now, Donald Trump tells us that he is very, very smart. I'm afraid that when it comes to foreign policy, he is very, very not smart.
You can see how loyal he is. He was begging for my endorsement. I could have said, Mitt, drop to your knees. He would have dropped to his knees.
Okay.
Boy.
Everybody's like, oops. Okay, how do I follow that? Stephen, okay, so you had your open letter to Donald Trump. Donald Trump is not good for the Republican Party.
Yes.
We have Mitt Romney going out and basically saying a lot of things that a lot of things that the Republican establishment are thinking. What else do you have?
Well, I think the commentary on the show the last 5 minutes, to include Donald Trump's own viewpoints he just shared, is exactly what concerns so many of us as national security professionals. Again, I'm here as a professional, not as a politician. I mean, I find it interesting that I was just referred to as a neocon. I didn't know I was old enough to be a neocon, but thanks for the compliment.
Neocons know no age, don't worry.
Look, the whole point of the letter, if you look at who signed the letter, these are people who cover the gamut of foreign policy.
But Stephen, is this the best you have?
The letter? No, the letter is a rollout.
The letter of Mitt Romney. Sabrina, what else is happening behind the scenes?
Well, the problem is that they are trying to pour their money into the candidates, this so-called establishment, and people who support more traditional Republican orthodoxy, into candidates like Mark Rubio and a bit into John Kasich as well. Basically anyone but Donald Trump. The problem is that what we've seen is that, you know, even paid advertising, it's been millions of dollars in anti-Trump advertising. So far, it hasn't really worked. You know, they've had endorsements. For example, Mark Rubio lined up every endorsement possible in recent contests of sitting governors in every state. He still couldn't win a single.
Came out to speak, support your candidate that you like, Demetrius. Why do you think none of this is working, or is there still some more to come out that might actually stop Trump's momentum?
And that's what I wanted to say. The issue is that I guess the voters are tired of the establishment. They're tired of money being pumped into candidates that no one really wants. And now everyone is fighting back because a lot of the times with those establishment candidates and the money that's being pumped into them, it's due to big corporations, and we've already seen where that has gotten our economy back in 2008 when we had when we had to bail out all of those companies. So I think this election, the Republicans, because they're having the same issue on the Democratic side, where people are just tired of the establishment Republicans and the money that's being pumped into their campaigns, and we all know that most of the time that means that that particular person, whoever they got the money from, is going to be the person, that company is going to have some say-so in policies.
You know what's funny? He brought up, I love that you just brought up the Democrats, though, because that's probably when I talk to people, probably their number 3 reason why they like Mr. Trump is because they're very scared of the Democrat machine and the Clinton machine. And you're going to combine those two for a very powerful ticket. Now, granted, Bernie's trying to do some damage, but I think most people are resounded to think that it's going to be Hillary. And a lot of people go, you know what? I like Ted Cruz, I like Marco Rubio, but the Clinton Democratic machine is almost the most well-tuned political machine we've ever had in history. And so they think that the only way to get that, and they see these crowds of 20, 30,000 for Mr. Trump, and they go, we're going to have to do that same thing. And I think that's probably number 3. The third reason why most people support Mr. Trump is really just to keep Hillary Clinton out of the White House.
But there's a right way to do this, though. As I said before, I am a conservative as well, and I understand that a lot of what Donald Trump is saying, to people who are voting for him especially, I understand why that resonates. I really do. But there's a right way to do this. This irresponsible rhetoric, this baseless attacks against both American citizens and American allies alike is why myself and others like us are getting together. And yes, the letter is just a start.
What else is there? Can you tell us?
Yes.
No, and how much time do you have? You're running out.
Yes.
So
I was gonna. Can I step in?
Well, no, because I'm going to explain to you exactly what we're doing first. What we're doing in this letter is, first off, rolling out a series of policy proposals. We're also going on media, such as this show, social media, of course, but I think also rallying people around, okay, what would a responsible foreign policy look like? And how do you make that case and that argument in a way that actually, doesn't disenfranchise both American citizens and our allies, more importantly, alike? These are things that, while Trump may be hitting on certain aspects of truth, there's a way to do this the right way, and he's simply not doing that the right way. And that's why you're seeing people running the gamut, coming from a variety of campaigns, both from 2012 and in 2016, and banding together and saying, look, there's a way to do this, and this is not the way to do it.
So you listed some of those tactics there. Hold on one second, Scotty, because Stephen listed some of the tactics. I want to share 2 points of view on what people think of that. So this is Mom Tweets, who says the speech by Mitt Romney was patronizing and likely considered an insult to Trump fans who don't want to be told what to think. So that's one person saying these tactics are backfiring. On the other hand, you have SMJ. He says, my father is a lifelong Republican. He always supports fiscal conservative candidates that balance social needs and compromise. The current candidates don't represent the best of the Republican Party. We're both Sanders supporters now for our own various reasons. So, Scotty, what do you make of that, losing party members?
Well, that's it, and that's why I think Trump's is appealing. But I want to tell this to my friend over there who's sitting there saying, oh, we're going to go on media and we're going to talk about strategy. It's a little too late for that, I hate to tell you. If you wanted to have that strategy, that's the problem with the Republican Party. Why we keep losing is because that's the kind of late strategy that we've used the last 2 elections. Maybe back in July, maybe in August, you might have had a chance. It's too late. We've already passed Super Tuesday. We're about to seal this nomination up probably by Tuesday, I would assume. Next Tuesday, once after you get through Florida.
Also,
go ahead, Demetrius.
I just wanted to say, and then the thing is, we're talking about the party and we're signing letters, but then it goes back again to who will we put up there, because clearly Marco Rubio and Ted Cruz are not the best candidates to put up in front of Hillary Clinton and the Hillary machine, because they will slaughter both of those candidates. Because first and foremost, we all know Ted Cruz as being the person that what he did with the whole government shutdown. Then you have Marco Rubio on the other hand, who can't even win his own home state.
Demetrius, Ted Cruz is outpolling Donald Trump against Hillary Clinton.
No, he's not. You're not including the crossover voters.
So one thing I'll say, though, about the concept of this potentially being too late is I do think that's a question on a lot of people's minds. You saw Mitt Romney give this speech, and of course there was an extent to which I think a lot of people were waiting on the sidelines to see how these contests actually play out. But there's also a sense that maybe there was some denial about the Donald Trump phenomenon. There was a long running thinking that he's not actually going to win any of these contests. Just wait and see. Everyone, the political press will feel silly when Marco Rubio wins every single primary, state, and caucus. And, you know, then you have Iowa, fine, Ted Cruz won Iowa, but then you have 3 consecutive back-to-back overwhelming
let me show
victories.
some graphics here, because it's easier, because you're reeling off numbers, because you can do this in your seat. Let me just show everybody here. This is the race so far. So we've got Donald, this is from Politico, thanks Politico. Donald Trump has got 384 delegates, Ted Cruz 300, Marco Rubio 151, and John Kasich's 37. The rest don't really matter. They have to get to 1,237. So Cruz is actually closing on Trump.
The problem for Ted Cruz is that moving forward, the map sort of flips, because Ted Cruz does really well in the strongly conservative pockets of the country. And, you know, in southern states, you know, a big part of his strategy was those Super Tuesday states in the South. Now it's going to favor people like Marco Rubio and John Kasich.
What about a third candidate? I'm trying to think, Stephen, how you're going to get to where you want to get. If you're saying Donald Trump is not the man, he's not saying the right things, who's the man, who's saying the right things? Could it be somebody we hadn't even thought about yet?
It quite possibly could be. However, if Donald Trump wins enough delegates during the primaries, then the idea of a broker convention will be a moot point. It will largely be irrelevant, because he'll have enough delegates and he will be the presumptive GOP
broker
nominee.
Convention in a sentence?
So essentially, this requires the rest of the party other candidates going to the floor at the official convention and challenging, you know, Donald Trump as the presumptive nominee. Basically, they would all go with their delegates and try to win the nomination on the floor through this contested process.
So you both mentioned this broken convention. I want to play something on the broken convention and what that might mean. First, I'll read this. This is what people think of that. Just some guy, that's his handle. He says, if there is a nasty fight at that convention, then there may be nothing left of the Republican Party, and we might see a rise of a new party. And on that note, we got a video comment from Brian, who talks about what will happen with the Republican Party. Have a listen.
The biggest issue facing the party as we approach a convention, in my view, is will there actually be a Republican Party after this election? Or will the Republican Party exist in the form that it does now? It's clear that there is, from the Trump presidency, from the Trump candidacy, that there is a good deal of frustration with the Republican Party from some of its adherents.
Scotty, do you want to take that on?
Yeah, I want to do. Let me put everybody's minds at ease. It's a lot more difficult than just nominating a name from the floor. Back after 2012, the RNC put in Rule 40, which is called the Ron Paul rule, that you have to have 8 states. If you have had to have won 8 states in order to have your name be put forward from this. So at this point, Donald Trump's the only one. Probably Ted Cruz will get that as well. In order for any outside name, the actual executive committee, which will meet 2 days before the RNC begins in Cleveland, will have to repeal Rule 40. And
Scotty,
these
make
folks are
this
being
quick. I've got 30
now.
seconds left for you. Finish your
So
sentence.
what I'm saying is it's almost going to be virtually impossible to have a contested convention with a name coming from the floor. It's not just going to happen that night. It will be, we'll see it coming.
Let's do a little bit of prognostication. I know, Scotty, who you think is going to be the presidential nominee for the Republican Party. Demetrius?
Yes.
Yes. Who is it going to be?
Donald Trump.
Ah.
It's
Stephen
quite
is looking
evident.
so miserable. Stephen, who's it going to be?
I think right now you'd have to say it's going to be Donald Trump. He's the odds-on favorite to win the nomination.
Sabrina.
Stephen, will you be my date to the inaugural ball? I will bring you.
Scotty, you're just rubbing it
People
in.
are
That's
coming
just
together on this
am.
program. I do think it will be Donald Trump. I think it's really difficult at this point to stop him. It was too little too late in my view.
Oh my goodness. Are you bereft, Stephen?
Well, again, I understand why he's saying what he's saying. I understand the anger he's channeling, but there has to be a responsible way to do this, both privately, of course, but also publicly. Look, you're the United States president. This is not a game.
President
this is
Trump,
serious
Goodness
business.
me. We'll be doing so many shows before that would actually be the case, I suspect. Malika Bilal, last thoughts.
I'll end with this tweet, bringing people together. American politics has become way too polarizing on both sides. People need hope and love, not fear and hatred. That's Jason on Twitter.
Oh, interesting. Not going to happen. Sabrina, Stephen, Scotty, Demetrius, thank you so much. We're not done yet. We've just got warmed up. I'm taking you online to stream.aljazeera.com. Hopefully our audience can join us there as well. Take care, everybody. Hello again, this is the Streams Online Post Show. We're going to pick up on our discussion about the Republican race for US President. I'm going to pick up with Malika.
Well, picking up on the video comment, Connie gave one answer. Demetrius, I'm wondering if you can answer that question, because a lot of people were tweeting us and sharing their concerns that there might not be a Republican Party as we know it going forward. What do you make of that, Demetrius?
Well, the only way there won't be a Republican Party going forward if we do this whole brokerage convention, because then you'll have the people, the voters, saying this is our candidate, and then you'll have the establishment saying no, but this is who we're putting up against him, and that will be like a slap in the face to the voters, and that's the last thing you want to do, because those voters have to vote for you in November, and if you don't have them behind you, then we can just kiss not just the Republican Party goodbye, but we can basically kiss this whole election goodbye. And there we have another Democrat in office for 4 years.
Scotty, 2 years ago, somebody had told you that Donald Trump would be running for president as a Republican. Would you have believed them?
6 months ago, 9 months ago.
Yeah.
I mean, we'd always heard those rumors. I asked him 2 years ago if he would even consider running for the mayor of New York,
Yeah.
to which he constantly teases me now and goes, mayor of New York, really? He always wants to go huge with it.
Yeah.
But this is where we've come to, and I think, could anybody have been able to pull off what he's done, or is it just Mr. Trump himself? I don't know. That would be a question if any other, a Carl Icahn or another big business guy, or is it because Mr. Trump and his actual strategy, believe it or not, that he's had in handling the voters and the delegation?
I mean, there's some very important points that people are bringing up about him not being presidential. One is the way that Donald Trump speaks, and the other one is about people being kicked out of his rallies, and they maybe come from an ethnic minority group. They may have a particular point of view that's very unpopular. How much of a concern is this to you? Because this is actually sending out signals about how presidential your candidate is.
Well, let me say this. When you look at these rallies and you have these, if these groups came in there, like the Black Lives Matter groups or the other student groups, and they were quiet and protested in quiet, I don't think they would be being kicked out. In fact, they probably wouldn't even be recognized. But what they're doing, what we're seeing them come in there to do for people who have waited for hours to get in there, and they start a scuffle, they get loud, they try to take away the attention from whoever's on stage, and most time it's Mr. Trump, then they need to be escorted out. So is that, we would do the same. If I went into a Bernie Sanders rally or to a Hillary Clinton rally, or you had other groups, isn't that what shouldn't we remove the folks that it's not fair?
That did happen actually at a Bernie Sanders rally, and actually people talked on stage, and then he actually got some very interesting people to be part of his campaign who were talking about the Black Lives Matter movement, and he kind of incorporated that and took that criticism on board. Stephen?
Look, I agree that you can't disrupt political rallies, or at least there's a time and a place and a way to appropriately do that. I do agree with that. My bigger concern is his statements that disenfranchise not only American Muslims or American Hispanics, but also our allies overseas. Look, his comments about Muslims in the Middle East, he seems to forget that there are large numbers of these people who, at great cost to their own lives, not just the government but the people, are supporting us, not just with the Iraq war, but with Syria, in Jordan, in Libya, in Egypt. These are people that have backed us courageously, and then now for him to say these statements is not only deeply hurtful, but it's just irresponsible, because we need these people to conduct any kind of operation overseas, to include the ones, I would argue, that Donald Trump argues for when he talks about military interventionism. So there's a right way to do this, and that's not it.
Sabrina, I want us to take a look back just for a second. 4 years ago, the Republican Party was talking about ushering in youth, the need to usher in youth, usher in minorities. That's something that people are picking up online. This is another Demetrius. This is Demetrius Minor. He says, the GOP is digging its own grave. With embracing Trump, they're isolating themselves from minorities, and this could have a long-term effect. Sarah says, I think in the end, for this party to survive, it's inevitable they'll have to change, and they'll have to be able to court the more conservative elements of minority groups. Has that happened? There are two Hispanic candidates in the race, but the electorate?
So it hasn't happened, and I think you're seeing this split where you have Ted Cruz and Donald Trump on one side who are challenging the notion that the party needs to undergo this huge transformation in order to win elections. In fact, they believe that there's been too much focus among party elites to broaden the tent. And then you have the other candidates who disagree. Now, the problem for someone like Marco Rubio and the problem that other candidates have faced the alternatives, is that they've been moved to kind of harden their own views on how they would do this outreach. So Marco Rubio, I mean, Demetrius brought this up earlier in the show. He had this big immigration bill that he co-sponsored, and then he ran as far away from it as he possibly can, and has angered a lot of the Latino supporters that he did have before. However he tries to explain it away, it's a reality that they're dealing with and that they know would hurt him in a general election. So they haven't done the outreach I think that they had envisioned at this point. But this goes back to who's to blame. And I think, again, the blame falls on congressional leaders, because it would have been up to them to resolve some of these issues when they had the power and the authority to do so through legislation and trying to find ways to work with this administration, and they failed to do that. And now they're wrestling with the consequences.
I'll just put it this way. I believe the Republican Party needs a big facelift. A big facelift. Like she said, basically when they had the power to do it, they didn't. A lot of the times what they did was they stayed idle in Congress, missed votes, didn't show up for votes, or just didn't even want to study what was about to be put forth. So if anything happens to the party, it's on their hands. Like I said, the Republican Party needs a very big facelift. That means new faces in the Republican Party. That means the old has to go, because clearly what they want is not what the people want now.
But Demetrius, you're supporting John Kasich, right?
That's correct. I'm supporting John Kasich, and I have a specific reason why I support John Kasich. For one, the reason I didn't support Donald Trump, and every day that I actually listen to him, it makes me move a little closer to him than anyone else. But it's because I know Marco Rubio as a candidate because I was here when he started running in office. Marco Rubio has a lot of skeletons in his closet, and if he even makes the president's as the presidential nominee of the Republican Party, he's going to be slaughtered again, just off of his record, just off of
That's
those.
That's a nice little tease there, Demetrius. We're like, what are the skeletons? Tell us. Just show us a little one of the skeletons. What are we talking about here?
Well, for one, Marco Rubio, when he was in Florida, there was a big scandal with, there's a big scandal in the Florida House, period, where he used some of the taxpayers' money on a credit card to fix his minivan.
Okay, this is allegedly, just to cover ourselves.
It was an
allegation.
Stated, okay. Yeah, alleged. It was an allegation that that was one thing that he did. Plus, when some other things when he was actually when he actually was a local politician, there were some things that happened then too.
Well, just to help, he did use the party credit card to pay for personal expenses. That actually, he has admitted that, and he said it was an error, it was an accident, and that he paid back the party. He reimbursed personally those expenses that he made, just to kind of clarify, because this actually came up a few months ago in the course of his presidential run, and they released his credit card statements. Now, obviously, they did not have proof that he paid off every expense that was listed, but they have said, and he has said that he did.
Well, the reason I asked Demetrius, I wanted to confirm that you are supporting Governor Kasich, because in the last debate, he gave, I thought, what was an appropriate analogy towards this idea that we always need outsiders to fix Washington. And he says, has anyone noticed how all these candidates always run on being Washington outsiders to fix Washington, and then they get in office and things get even more dysfunctional? So to your point earlier about needing fresh blood to fix Washington and to fix the politicians, that would seem to go against what your own candidate said, and frankly, what I agree with.
There's a little question mark right now between now and, let's say, March the 15th, when we'll find out how Florida votes, how Ohio votes, and that will be pretty much decisive for Kasich and also for Rubio as well. And I think we just have to leave it for right now, because otherwise we're all doing punditry and we have no clue what is going on, which is pretty much the way we have been going for the last 6 months of the year. I have no clue what's going on. Meanwhile, let's just wrap up with Malika.
And though we have no clue, people have pretty determined ideas of what they're going to do personally. So one tweet on one side, this is Laura. She says, if they, meaning the establishment, disenfranchises Trump, I'll leave the party. On the other hand, we got a Facebook comment from Jillian who says these people know he can't possibly win. She's referring to Trump. Moderate Republicans will vote Democrat before they vote for Trump.
Demetrius and Scotty and Stephen and Sabrina, thank you very much for being on our show today. Really enjoyed the conversation. Take care, everybody.